creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary.
We're losing them.
The extraordinary is the terrifying description of hell given by two men who literally died and were brought back to life.
I was literally scared to death. I mean, absolutely something horrible had happened. I didn't know what. The doctor said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I've been to hell."
What rotten thing did you do to deserve the hell experience?
Their accounts have changed the course of research into near-death experiences. It is the night a plane crashed to earth in the crowded suburbs of Melbourne. To one man, the disaster came as no surprise. He'd told people it was going to happen.
Everyone at work actually said, you know, you must be psychic.
I was so amazed. I was telling my husband, and I was just completely dumbfounded that it actually happened.
It is the night actor Lou Gossett Jr. was visited by his deceased 116-year-old grandmother.
So don't you ever give up. How many times I tell you, you just trust in God. And I felt it, so maybe it was her upbringing, but I felt like in my dream, she was there and said that to me.
And she gave him his map to stardom. The Extraordinary is the chilling appearance of British actor John Le Mesurier in Sydney after he died.
I wasn't worried or anything. I just thought, oh, this is interesting. I mean, I haven't had a lot of supernatural experiences in my life, but I know he was there.
A vision witnessed by movie expert Bill Collins and his wife, Joan. Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
Bill Collins' amazing experience a little later. Good evening, I'm Warwick Moss. Among the medical cases of people who have died and come back to life, there are countless stories of finding peace, of being welcomed by a brilliant white light. The researchers call these near-death experiences. The religious and scientific communities are divided as to whether they are hallucinations or actual encounters with the afterlife. But there's been an eerie development in this research. Documented near-death cases who report not a white light, but fire and pain. People who believe they went to hell and back.
God knows what they saw when they passed over. Those who say they went to the edge and came back have described fear and pain, rivers of fire. They talk of seeing the hideous faces of the damned and hearing the miserable wailing of souls lost. One of them was this man, Charles McCaig.
It was horrible. It was just unbelievable that I was told by the nurse that my hair was literally standing on end. My pupils had already dilated. And everybody in the room knew I had a great fear.
McCaig's and others' descriptions form the basis of a new book by Dr. Maurice Rawlings, an eminent cardiologist and professor of medicine at the University of Chattanooga in Tennessee, a physician who believed in neither heaven nor hell until that day in January 1977.
I could see there were hell experiences. I could see that Jesus Christ was something in this room. It was the Spirit working, and here I am, a doctor, thinking I'm in charge of everything. It made me feel little, not big.
What happened that day changed Dr. Rawlings forever and set the course for a new era in the research of near-death experiences. People who have literally died on the operating table and been brought back to life. In the United States, some 11 million near-death cases have reported seeing the bright light of life after death. Only in the past year, according to Dr. Rawlings, has the untold story of those experiences come to light. A lot of them, he says, look down into hell, later shutting out the unbearable vision, an F on the report card of life.
Who's going to report an F on the report card years later? You're not even going to tell your parents about it. They don't even tell their family about it. It's quiet. They either have a conversion experience or they sublimate this negative experience, put it in painless portions of the memory so they can live with it.
Rawlings discovered the phenomenon the day Charles McCaig died several times of a heart attack on the floor of his office, and vividly described seeing hell as he fought for life.
He says, I'm in hell, kept saying I'm in hell.
After McCaig came others. When questioned about the moment of clinical death, they described gruesome, hideous scenes not dissimilar to some of the satanic scenes imagined by history's masters. The four rivers of fire in Giotto's 14th century Satan was a common theme. Some sounded like descriptions of the grotesque bestial Satan of Francesco Traini. Most reported a sense of floating just above the scenes of hell, where fires licked around the naked, overcrowded masses of Signorelli's version of hell. Dr. Rawlings' research for To Hell and Back is strangely mirrored in Bosch's 15th century impression called Purgatory, in that it shows the commonly reported tunnel of white light, yet below, the human spirits are caught in a darker Neverland. But it was Charles McCaig's experience that first convinced Dr. Rawlings there was a grim side to life after death. In early January 1977, he had checked into Dr. Rawlings' diagnostic center with chest pains.
I was in the diagnostic center, had checked in, thinking I had a heart attack at work. They wanted to give me a stress test before they sent me home. And during the stress test, I looked over at the treadmill machine, and all of a sudden I thought something was wrong because it was straight line. I didn't know anything about it, but at the same time I knew it should be going up and down like a heartbeat, and I fell off.
We're losing them. The nurses were there. One of them was using the embu bag, actually started with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And I was doing the external heart compression.
McCaig's heart had stopped completely for several minutes before the team could restart it.
The first time I came back, I was literally scared to death. I mean, absolutely something horrible had happened. I didn't know what. The doctor said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I've been to hell."
He kept saying, "Doctor, don't stop." And usually they'd tell me, "Get your big hands off me, you're breaking my ribs." And he said, "Every time you stop, I'm in hell."
So still.
Rawlings said he and his nurses were shocked to see a fear in McCaig's eyes that went beyond anything they had witnessed in previous patients.
He was fighting me off. He saw the hell's fire. He saw demons or beings coming after him. He kept saying, "I am in hell. Pray for me." And I'm doing one-hand massage, adjusting the pacemaker. I'd let go and his eyes would roll up, sputter, turn blue, stop breathing once more.
The next day, when Rawlings tried to pry more information of the hell McCaig witnessed, the memory was gone.
I have no recall of being in hell, don't want to recall it. The next experience was that I saw my mother, which passed away when I was just a few months old, 10, 12 months old. I saw her with my stepmother, which had passed away about 10 years earlier. No voice contact or touching or anything. They just had their hands outstretched like they was welcoming me.
From that moment, all memory of his vision of hell seemed to have been erased. The reason so few near-death patients will talk about going to hell and back, according to Rawlings, is the obvious question.
What rotten thing did you do to deserve the hell experience?
But one man, Ron Reagan, has told the whole incredible story of his visit to hell and back, and the reason he deserved to be condemned.
We'll be back with the man who went to hell in just a minute.
All around me, I could smell the burning like an electric welder. I could smell the smoke. I could hear screams. And after a little while, it was like I was moving through the flames, high, looking down.
Of the growing number of eyewitness accounts from people who saw the fire of hell, none is more disturbing than the story told by ex-criminal William Ronald Reagan. This is his story of his voyage to hell and back.
When I was 9 years old, I lived in the mountains of East Tennessee with an abusive, alcoholic father, very poor, no religious background, just cursing and screaming and abuse. I had to walk 2 miles to catch the school bus. A widow lady called me aside one day and said, "I have a gift for you." And she gave me a baby lamb. We became friends. It would actually follow me, wait for me at the school bus stop. I came in one afternoon and the lamb was missing. When I got up to the house, my dad was cussing, changing a flat tire on an automobile. And I saw my lamb laying on the ground beside him, bloody. He'd taken a tar tool and killed it, plunged it through its body. At 9 years old, I began to scream and run into the hills, screaming, "He's killed my lamb." At that point in my life, I just became full of hatred and violence. I didn't understand it. I was a runaway by the age of 12 years old in the juvenile system. And by the age of 15, I was in reform school for manslaughter. And I had stolen an automobile and running from the police, had an accident, people were killed. I was charged with manslaughter and put in another place till I was 18 years old. And all this time, my life just filled with hatred and anger and violence. As my life progressed, I met a young lady named Elaine. No one would have anything to do with me. I was such a violent person. She saw something in me that no one else could see. In 1964, we were married. She was 15 years old. I was 17. We had no money, no job, no place to live. So we started out to make our fortune. Wound up robbing liquor stores, gas stations, just trying to be Bonnie and Clyde, I suppose. But it wasn't long till my life was completely wrapped up in drugs and alcohol.
Feel it. Where is it? I don't know. Get off me.
She had to leave me because of the violence that I was inflicting on her. I'd lived in Atlanta, Georgia for about 8 years on the streets. I rode with the Iron Cross Biker Club. I thought that kind of lifestyle and violence was what I needed.
Grandma! Grandma! come on. Get her this way, get her this way, get her this way. Come on, come on.
Yeah, I know. Grandma. One morning I woke up in the Fulton Tower prison system in Atlanta. And they came to me and said, we've arrested you so many times for violence, for shooting, for brawling, but now we're going to interrogate you over the murders that have been taking place here in Atlanta. I didn't know if I'd done this or not. I didn't know. I just had no memory. I'd done so much drugs that I couldn't remember very well.
As the police led Reagan into a court the next day, he fled through a side door. He jumped a bus to Knoxville, Tennessee, and hid out with his former wife and 6-year-old son. Within days, he was again drugged out and with his small son at his side, attacked a man outside a local store.
The hatred just boiled up inside me, and I hit him. And when he got up with a broken bottle, he started stabbing me. And I lifted my left arm to try to keep the wounds from hitting my face. He severed the biceps muscle, the ligaments, the main artery, severed an artery in my leg. And the manager of that store said, well, if you don't get to the hospital in just a matter of minutes, you'll bleed to death. And my little son saw all of this. You know, here he is, just 5, 6 years old, hysterical.
Several minutes later, in the back of a speeding ambulance, Reagan died and looked down into hell.
The paramedic in that ambulance looks in my face and said, sir, do you know the Lord? And I didn't know what he was talking about.
Sir, do you know the Lord? Jesus?
I don't know any Jesus.
Well, you better talk to him. He's in a serious condition.
Damn you.
And in a matter of minutes, it seemed like this ambulance burst into flames. I actually thought the ambulance was on fire. And all around me, I could smell the burning like an electric welder. I could smell the smoke. I could hear screams. And after a little while, it was like I was moving through the flames, high, looking down. And when I came out of the flames, I looked down on what appeared to be a small lake with cliffs all around it. But the lake was burning. And the lake was filled with people. And they're screaming, and they're burning. Everybody's on fire. And they're all screaming. And then, like a close-up lens of a camera, their faces start coming close to me, and I recognize some of them. I see ones that have died of overdoses, some that have died in robbery attempts, some that have died drunk in automobile accidents, some that have died in shootings. And they're all screaming my name and saying, Ronnie, don't come here. There's no way out. And I hear this, and I smell this, and I don't understand. I've never really been afraid of anything. My life's been filled with violence and hatred. I've been shot, I've been cut, but I never feared anything. And then blackness came. And for hours and days and weeks, I'm unable to get this off my mind. I can't, as soon as I'm out of the hospital, I go try to get high, but I can't get high. I keep seeing this. No matter how much I drink or how much dope I do, I can't get this out of my mind. And I don't want the light off. I want the lights on all the time because I keep seeing this horrible sight.
The next morning, Reagan's wife convinced him to go with her to church.
And a man gets up to talk, and I don't know a Bible from a church pew. But he gets up to talk and he reads St. John chapter 1, verse 29, which said, Behold the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world. And he could have read anything and it wouldn't have meant anything to me, but when he said Lamb, I related to that because I remembered my lamb. And he said, Jesus is God's lamb, and he died for the sins of all mankind to spare us from hell. Well, I didn't know anything of what he meant, hell, but he went on to describe, and I said, that's what I saw. Somebody's finally telling me what I saw. I didn't know how to pray. I wasn't religious, but this was what I said. God, if you're real, and Jesus is real, and all of this is what you're trying to tell me in my life, then please kill me or cure me, because I can't live. I'm a worthless dad. I'm a no-count husband. I can't hold a job. Please, God, cure me or kill me. And that morning, I cried like a dam burst inside me. Not since I was 9 years old, and all of the pain and the hate and the anguish came out of me. And that's been 22 years ago. And that very morning, I felt that I should tell this to other people everywhere and anywhere I have the opportunity. And today, I'm still telling the story.
In 1993, a news flash beamed across thousands of TV screens. A light plane had crashed in the suburbs of Australia's second largest city, Melbourne. Seconds after takeoff, the aircraft plunged back to Earth in the dark of night. The city was shocked, but for one man, the crash came as no surprise. He knew it was going to happen.
John Cassidy and his wife Linda are raising a young family in the suburbs of Melbourne. The Cassidys both work, but they have one goal, one dream, a safe and secure life for their children. But it was a very different kind of dream that intruded into their lives late last year. Friday the 3rd of December, in the early hours of the morning. The Cassidy family were all safely in their beds, but John's sleep was disturbed by a recurring dream, almost a nightmare.
I had the dream 2 or 3 times that particular night. It was as clear as bell. I was actually talking to someone through the dream, telling them about the plane, that it was coming down, and whoever in my dream that I was talking to, I was saying that, you know, it's all right, you know, no one's died, it's landed near houses, and, you know, there was a flash beforehand. But all I could really say, it was a small plane, but I really don't know how many people were on it, but it wasn't a great big jumbo jet. It was definitely a small plane.
Like any other household with children, that Friday morning at the Cassidys was hectic.
And John came in to me, and being typical Friday morning, I've got children to get ready for school and kinder and shopping to do. I don't have much time for husbands with their dreams as well. But he did come in and say that he did have a dream, that there was going to be a plane crash, and I said to him, oh, that's fine, because we've just come back from holidays and we're not going anywhere, so it doesn't affect us at all.
I actually went into it a little bit more with my wife, and just telling her, you know, that there was no one hurt, and the pilot was the only one that was slightly hurt. Didn't think any more of it. I actually went to work, and in the afternoon I actually brought it up just out of the blue. I said to Lisa and a few of the others at work that there was a light plane crash that was going to happen on the weekend.
One of the colleagues who heard John recount his dream had a special reason to sit up and take notice. Even now, Lisa Bullock can remember the details.
The plane crash that happened near an airport and on houses, and why I took a lot of notice was because my little sister was flying to Queensland that morning, and so it frightened me a little bit, but he said it was a light plane, a small plane, not a big plane. So that was how I first found out about it.
By Friday night, all thoughts of the dream had completely slipped from Linda Cassidy's mind.
I was sitting here doing bookwork and I had the television on in the background, and I did hear those news flashes that come across, and I heard one of them but just came in on the very tail end and missed it, and I sort of thought, did I hear something about a plane crash? And then I got the hour later and heard about it, and I was quite amazed.
De Havilland Dove had smashed into another 4 houses.
John?
I'd actually gone to bed, I was in bed, and my wife yelled out, you know, "Oh God, you better come and have a look at this, John. It's your plane crash is on tally." So I walked out and I actually looked at the TV and I thought, you know, that's it.
Dazed, shocked and injured, the survivors sat on the lawn of the house where the plane ground to a halt.
John's dream certainly was it, or at least very, very close. As they reported on the news, the plane was a de Havilland Dove, effectively a light aircraft, just as he'd seen in his dream only hours before. It had taken off from Melbourne's Essendon Airport at 8:38 that night. Minutes later, it was in trouble. The undercarriage clipped a power pole. There was a shower of sparks. The flash in John Cassidy's dream. Then, the de Havilland Dove, with 10 people on board, crashed into a street not far from the airport. Miraculously, no one on board, no one on the ground was killed. A point that John Cassidy had made over and over to his wife and his workmates.
To determine the cause of the accident.
Even my wife was very, very shocked with it, because I had told her about it during the day and it happened that night. She thought it was very weird. Everyone at work actually said, you know, you must be psychic.
I was so amazed. I was telling my husband and I was just completely dumbfounded that it actually happened. And it was so much, more or less exactly what John said at work that day.
Since then, John Cassidy has had another dream or two, and he's convinced there'll be more in the future. Next time, though, you can be sure the initial reaction from his wife and friends will be a lot more positive.
I am sceptical about this type of thing, but John's dream has come true, so therefore there has to be something to it, and I don't question it anymore. I just listen to his dreams.
Those who make it to the very top in this life very often come from its lowest depths. Early struggle builds the strength to climb the highest pinnacle. Actor Lou Gossett is one of them, but he also believes his early life gave him the spirituality that opens his mind and soul to messages from the beyond.
Gossett won a Best Supporting Oscar for his tough Marine performance in An Officer and a Gentleman, and you may remember his Emmy-winning role in the classic TV miniseries Roots. These roles were as opposite as the stages of Lou Gossett's life, a series of roller coaster highs and lows that have left him a deep sense of fate and the uncontrollable path of man's destiny. Lou has experienced the best and the worst of it.
Agony and ecstasy are very necessary evils. Without one, you can't appreciate the other. Pain, joy, hunger, being full, all of it is part of a wonderful circle called life. And I feel better now, having gone through all pains and agonies and joys in my life, and disappointments and conquests.
Today he has a spiritual grasp on life's meaning that comes not only from the experience, but encounters with the other side.
Gifts fall in our path, I believe that. And I believe that there is a divine order in that way. And if we stay in that kind of focus, we recognize them as they come. And each one is a crossroads.
One of those gifts presented itself on a gloomy day in 1985.
Well, I had a pretty successful life, artistically. My life personally was alone, very lonely kind of life. There's a certain time in your success when you have no time for dates, no time for almost your friends. You have to keep the blinders on, and while you're on a roll, do it. And it was one of those days, and I had my son. He was approximately 11, 12 years old, and he was kind of lonely too because nobody visited him. He was a star's son, and he couldn't figure out whether they were his friends for real. Or... So that was my oldest son, and my friend David Hartman was on Good Morning America, and they had this series of hungry and homeless children in the big cities of America. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that there's at least 1 million in every big city, at least. They were in St. Louis, and a reporter saw this kid, and he was throwing stones in this little pond. And she surprised him and put a microphone in his face and said, if you had a wish, what would it be? And he said, with a very grown-up face, I want something to eat every day and someplace to stay. So my heart went out, and I made the calls to all the guys. I said, hey, why don't we get together and have this benefit and raise this money for all these children so that we can go to the supermarkets and make sure that they have food, and we can go to the clothing store and make sure they have clothing, etc. Medicine. Because I believe that the bottom line in any civilized country, especially America being the richest, the bottom line for every student and every person in America is free education, free medicine, free shelter, clothing, and love. That's the bottom line. Everybody should start there, and then go from there if you want. So we had that concept, and they said, okay, you go and meet him, and we'll start the thing. So I went out there, and that was the mistake I made. I met him.
It was then that something automatic and far greater took over.
And so I met him in this hotel room, the Chase Hotel, in this suite, and he had this brown paper bag and a sweater, very neat. And I looked at him, I said, you want to live with me? He said, yeah. And of course I asked permission of my oldest son, who was very lonely. He said, yes, please. And now those two are kind of inseparable. They miss one another because the oldest guy is in college now. But that was 11 years ago. My life has been blessed, has not been easy, but it's been totally exciting. And here he is, big enough to be a football player, so he's not hungry anymore.
Gossett's son Sati and adopted son Sharon live in affluent Malibu, California, a far cry from life in Brooklyn, where his mother was a maid and his father a janitor. It was a surreal encounter with his roots, his deceased 116-year-old great-grandmother, that turned his life around. She was a former slave who was alive when Abraham Lincoln signed the bill abolishing slavery in the United States.
The matriarch was my great-grandmother, who died at approximately 115, 116 years old. So my spirit guide, if you want to call it that, is my great-grandmother, Grandma Ray. And when the youngest of my cousins died, when the youngest of my cousins grew up enough to get married and move away to the suburbs, less than 24 hours later, my great-grandmother caught a little cold, went to bed, and never woke up. I don't think she left. I think the way she taught us to live, like paying your respects when somebody dies, all of that, the way you behave with one another is very strong. And there was a dark time in my life when I was about to quit the business because I was not working. It was all white in the business, and none of us were working, people who really deserved it. And I got very depressed. Didn't know what else to do. My other alternative was to drive a taxi cab. And I said, is this what my life's going to be? And I was very depressed. I didn't know what to do. It seems like in my sleep, she came and she gave me a spanking. She used to give me a spanking around the ankles with a switch. She said, don't you ever give up. How many times I tell you that you just trust in God and you can... I felt it. So maybe it was her upbringing, but I felt like in my dream, she was there and said that to me. And I woke up the next day angry and found an agent who agreed with me. And between myself and the agent, we went all the way up to officer and gentleman. I got somebody to be on my side, that they believed that I wanted it bad enough, and I deserved it bad enough. And they devoted themselves. Ed Bundy, the late Ed Bundy, he's around too. And he was the one man that picked up stakes from New York and came out to California less than 6 months after I went out there and took over my career. And the result of that was officer and gentleman. Something that no African-American actor went up for. And the rest is kind of blessed. I haven't gone away from that since. but I do believe that my great-grandmother is probably in this room.
How would you feel if you were deep in conversation with someone when that person's very famous but very dead husband suddenly appeared standing behind her? Would you believe what you'd seen? Could you cope? One of the world's leading movie experts knows what it feels like to confront such an experience.
I've just seen one of the greatest movies made in the last few years, and I want everybody to see it who's mature.
They don't call him Mr. Movies for nothing. There's something infectious about his exuberant passion for the classics of the silver screen. For more than 30 years, Bill Collins has been passing on his seemingly endless store of knowledge to his fans on television, on radio, and in newspapers across the country.
I think Lloyd Nolan was in it too.
3 decades that have been his very own golden years of Hollywood.
I've met a lot of interesting people. Now, you never know who is going to be interesting. Sometimes you think, oh, I can hardly wait to meet such and such a person, and when you meet them, it's a disaster.
One of those interesting people was Joan Le Mesurier. Their meeting wasn't a disaster by any means, but it did have its moments. Its supernatural moments.
Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler?
Joan had been married to the late actor John Le Mesurier, and she'd written a book about their life together. Not even Bill Collins can list the countless British movies John appeared in. But certainly in Australia, he's best remembered as the long-suffering Sergeant Wilson in Dad's Army.
Jody, do you think you could perhaps manage to do it at the same time as the others do it?
I'm sorry, Sergeant.
So you makes the rest of the platoon look so slovenly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sergeant. I'm sorry,
Well,
Sergeant.
it couldn't possibly be the way in which I give the word of command, I suppose.
Bill was having a chat with Joan Le Mesurier about her autobiography. The atmosphere was cosy and friendly in the lounge room of his Sydney home.
And I can remember it as if it were yesterday, you know. As Joan Le Mesurier was talking to me and answering my questions, I saw John Le Mesurier standing behind her. And as I listened and watched her, John Le Mesurier walked up and down behind the lounge, nodding his head as if he was listening to what she was saying and agreeing with what she was saying. John Le Mesurier was dressed in a kind of formal, casual way that one expects an English gentleman to dress. And very well groomed, and he just looked, not like he looks in Dad's Army, he just looked as he always looked in films where he played perhaps lawyers or doctors or people of that we tend to respect because they look the way we think they should look. And that's the way he looked. I wasn't worried or anything, I just thought, oh, this is interesting. I mean, I haven't had a lot of supernatural experiences in my life, but I know he was there.
Looking back now, Bill recalls that was only part of the story. After Joan Le Mesurier left, Bill and his wife, coincidentally another Joan, were talking about the interview.
And I looked at my wife and I said, you may not believe this, but I've got to tell you something. You'll never guess what happened while I was talking to Joan Le Mesurier. And my wife, Joan, said to me, you saw him too, didn't you? She'd seen him as well. She saw him walking backwards and forwards behind the lounge, listening to Joan tell me about him. And that was the creepy bit, that Joan had seen him too, and we'd both remained quite calm and chatty and hadn't mentioned it, and there you are.
Bill finds it hard to explain, but thinks that probably he was too taken aback to mention the mysterious appearance to Joan Le Mesurier. Nevertheless, he has a sneaking suspicion she may have felt it too, especially when you consider the dedication she wrote to Bill in his copy of her book.
She said, we have connected. She had a lovely, exhilarating visit with us, and I thought, well, you certainly did. And it wasn't just you. We'd connected with John LeMessurier as well. So that's one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had of something that's extraordinary. And I treasure that very much because it seems to me that to have an experience like that is almost an honour, you know? I thought, I just had this feeling that he must have felt comfortable to be there with us because he looked content. I won't say he looked exhilarated or happy. He just looked content. And I was very pleased at the whole thing.
Bill Collins is just one of the many well-known names who have had puzzling encounters with the unexplained in the past. Over the coming weeks, we'll meet some of the biggest names in the entertainment world and hear their personal stories of the things that have changed their lives. People like Roger Moore.
And I swear I left my body. And I went up above stage 12, and I was right above all the sound stages at MGM. And I was up there in the clouds looking down. I held my breath so long I was hallucinating.
Linda Gray.
Went like this. Through the windshield, I thought, oh my God, you know, what is happening? I was freaked out. And he said, "Happy birthday to you." And his hands went like that. And I thought, oh my God, what's happening to me?
And Margaret.
Something was taking control over their lives that they didn't want. And it's no accident. That's a very good question.
And Lloyd Bridges.
It got kind of eerie, the whole thing, and my wife and I decided not to do it anymore because it got, you know, some of the things that happened were just amazing.
Stark and foreboding lighthouse sits deep in the Southern Ocean. To many, it means safety and a steady course. But to others, it is a dark and sinister place.
I knew whatever it was in there didn't want me in there. So I put my guitar in the case and I felt my way down the steps. At the same time, with my right hand, I was trying to find the key to the lighthouse so I could get out there and lock it up and just leave. I felt uncomfortable there.
The ghost that inhabits the lighthouse on Kangaroo Island.
I wouldn't go and stay the night there again.
An untold story. Next time.
4 hours that changed 2 lives. More on that next time. Before we go, if you'd like us to investigate a story, write to The Extraordinary, Post Office Box 462, Newport Beach, Sydney, Australia, 2106. Now another upcoming story. It's from veteran Hollywood actor Mickey Rooney, a man who knows more about the ups and downs of life than most. For now, good night. See you in the future.
And I looked, and he was looking at me. And he said, "Just as long as you know it." And I looked down and looked back, and he was gone.